Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The title of this next panel is Increasing Europe's Capabilities to Uphold the Transatlantic Link. Now, I think there's nobody in Europe that doesn't realize that it's now or never when it comes to upholding the transatlantic link. And the decisions that were made at the NATO summit in The Hague were the result of that. But those decisions don't stand on its own. The whole 3.5% plus 1.5% wasn't just made up. It came from an immense effort of overhauling all of the military strategies and plans that NATO and NATO allies have. That complete overhaul of military planning led to two historic achievements. The first is that because of this overhaul, NATO and national defense plans are now more integrated than ever. And that is unheard of in the world, unheard of in history, that so many armed forces are able to do that, that they trust each other enough to say, okay, if you develop that, then I will develop that, and then together we will be strong. The second historic development is that for the first time now, this sort of tapestry of military planning forms the basis of our NATO defense planning process. That means that where the money is spent on, that set of capability targets is for the first time threat-based. It's not a level of ambition, it's not a nice to have, it's very much a need to have. Europe knows that it's now or never. The willingness is there. Increasingly, the money is there, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. It's still difficult to get this done. And we're going to talk in this panel about why it's difficult, but also we're going to talk about the things that are going right. We have four esteemed panelists to talk about this. And the first is Dr. Andris Spruits, Minister of Defense of the Republic of Latvia. Can I ask you, please, Minister, to come onto the stage as a... Thank you. Yes, please. Thank you. As a professor, I imagine you are in your natural habitat, so you will feel even more comfortable than normal. The second speaker is Mr. Sebastian Hartmann, Parliamentary State Secretary for the Federal Ministry of Defense in Germany. Thank you. He has informed me that he just came from a very long budget meeting at the Bundestag, where the good news is that the money is on the table. But now it's up to operational readiness, which is also one of the items that is in his portfolio. The third speaker is Lieutenant General Eric Peltier. He is the Deputy Director General for International Relations and Strategy at the Ministry of Armed Forces in France. And now, in that capacity, he is very much a diplomat as well as a general, and that's why today he is in a civilian dress. And our final speaker is Mr. Jack Wadling, a Senior Research Fellow for Land Warfare at the Royal United Services Institute in the UK. I found out a couple of days ago that Jack was on the panel yesterday as well as today. And when I checked with the organization if that was indeed the case, they said, yes, we would. If we had our way, Jack would be on all of the panels. So we consider ourselves very, very lucky. What I'm going to do is I'm going to offer each of our panelists the chance to give a few minutes of opening remarks. And then I'm going to turn it immediately to you, to the audience, to ask them questions. So I would like to give a minister the first opportunity to speak. Sir.
From here? Or?
Yeah, whichever you prefer. Do you prefer here?
Yes, of course. So first of all, thank you, Lena, and dear friends, dear colleagues, dear participants, also on behalf of co-organizing team as the Ministry of Defense is also one of the contributors to the conference. Of course, we are very happy to welcome all of you. Of course, my fellow panelists, but also the speakers and participants of the conference. I think this conference is really one of the main events, one of the main intellectual and political hubs where we can exchange not only thoughts, but also where we can paint the roadmap, how we can move forward as well. As you said, sort of what has been achieved, but at the same time, what are the challenges, what we're facing, what are the tasks in this regard. I think there are the very good description in a panel, the key words in the description of the panel. The key words are that it must be right mindset when we move forward for our security. The there is a fundamental shift in the mindset. It must take continuously. It's about existential threats, what we are all facing, but it's also about a readiness to adjust. So it's about agility. This conference is agile. It adjusts also in terms of location, but we as a community of the like-minded, agility, ability to adjust is always important. And of course, the mindset, and I'm a bit reminded of some of the intellectuals of the previous years who expressed that, Americans from Mars, Europeans from Venus. And now it's time for everyone to be from the Mars, also for Europeans. So we must be much more assertive. We must step up in terms of the mindset. We must contribute. We must be ready also to not just defend territorial of nations, but actually defend all the NATO community. So it's our whole responsibility for the whole the NATO alliance. So the mindset is an absolutely important basis to realize what we are facing and also to be ready for those challenges to address them. The second one is, and it has been discussed, and you mentioned the Hague, the investment and commitment. So investment is crucial in this regard. Without investment, which demonstrates commitment, you cannot implement the mindset. So even if you have a right mindset, if you don't have a commitment in terms of the financial resources, it is impossible to acquire the necessary capabilities. It is not possible to implement those regional plans to build a whole defense architecture. Latvia is doing its homework. This year already we are approaching 4%, and next year will be close to 5%, and then we move towards 5% for defense. And it's not just about sustaining our system, but it's exactly about building it. It's building in terms of capabilities, air defense, infantry fighting vehicles, the artillery systems, deep strikes, so everything what you need also actually to be efficient. And of course, I can elaborate on this also later on. And the last but not the least, it is about also another key word in description of this panel. It's about technological leap. So you have to be agile and adjust also in terms of technologies. We see that there is, in our eyes, a military revolution taking place in the battlefield in Ukraine in many ways, being it much more transparent as it never has been. Also exactly applying new technologies, even though we always must remember it's about combined arms. One specific technology will not change everything, but combining those technologies, implementing, integrating, coordinating, of course, this is what is important within national armed forces, but also among nations as such. So the building this architecture, it's a very subtle and very complicated task, but that's what we are doing, and I think we are doing successfully. So that's why technologies are absolutely the crucial indispensable. That was also mentioned here. The Latvia, from my first day as a minister, we immediately focused also on drone technologies. We started to co-lead together with UK, the drone coalition. We are building our drone army. We are willing to lead also EU capabilities on drones, but it's not just about drones. It's about counter drones, it's about artificial intelligence, it's about 5G, etc., etc. So it's in generally about making innovative approach and being agile in terms of creativeness to our armed forces and our security in general. So that's why we need to be agile, we need to be assertive, we need to have a right mindset, but it of course also requires investment and commitment.
Minister, the capability targets that NATO set a couple of years ago, many allies were already not meeting them, and now the new set of capability targets are even higher because the threat has gone up. Are you confident about Latvia's ability to make it, to develop and to do what it has promised to its allies?
I am absolutely confident about Latvia's.
Are you confident about the others?
That's another question. I am confident about Latvia because to reach those targets, generally we need approximately 5%, and we are very clear on this ambition, on this roadmap that we will be implementing this. And there is, here I would say there is a consensus also among political parties, about absolute majority of political parties, that investment in defense and also meeting those capability targets are absolutely crucial, are indispensable. As for others, I think I will let those others to intervene and to speak. I believe that there is an opportunity. I think the Hague Summit was success in this regard. The commitment to contribute, of course, it might take some time. I can say that Latvia, of course, always encourages to do as quickly as possible, not to have in 10 or 15 years' time, because we must remember what we are dealing with. We are not dealing with a country with whom we will be able to arrange some kind of date of the battle. There will not be date. So the hybrid warfare takes place all the time. So the hybrid incidents are not only basically on a border for the conventional warfare, it takes every time. So we see those incidents also recently in the Baltic Sea, in Estonia, in Copenhagen, in Poland, etc., etc. We can continuously expand this list. But I think also here NATO shows agility, and what we see with the Eastern Sentry, not only Baltic Sentry, but also Eastern Sentry, we show that Russia wants to have less NATO in the region, and actually it gets more and more. So there is really a reaction from the positions of strength and confidence. And this is a good sign that, of course, we are realizing what we are dealing with, and the action is also absolutely the primary goal and task.
Yeah, and exactly as you said, our adversary will determine the timeline. Hybrid warfare is constantly ongoing,
Absolutely.
and a large-scale physical attack can come at any time in any domain. So we have to be ready. And in the past, if an ally didn't do what they promised, it took a risk only with its own security. And there was time, in crisis management, there was time to fill the gap and look around the table. And now if an ally doesn't do what they have promised, it takes a risk with everybody's security. And that's the big difference. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hartmann now to talk about Germany's point of view.
Okay, thank you very much, Eleonora. Thank you, dear Excellency. I think I can say as a starter, I could not agree more, because we have to ensure that we are meeting the challenges of our time and make clear that Europe is on the way to do what we can do. But we should start not without saying that Russia's full invasion of Ukraine is the greatest and the gravest threat to European sovereignty and our territorial sovereignty. And it's a threat, and Russia is acting in these days, in these moments. And we are seeing a kind of hybrid warfare. And in Germany, there's a debate on how to encounter that and how to act, because we are seeing Russia's actions. It's not only about airspace violations, and NATO made clear that we are able to act. We have doubled our capacity on air policing, for example, from Rostock, from one day to another day, to make clear we are going to see what Russia is doing, and we are going along with all of the growing numbers of cyber attacks, the disinformation, the electronic warfare, and Russia is increasing its capacities. Russia is spending more than ever on its military. Russia is increasing its industrial capacities, and we have to react on that, and we have to make clear that it's also an information and psychological condition setting. And if we are here in the Baltic Sea area as part of a strong alliance, we are seeing it's also the question of a whole of society approach to encounter that, because it's trying to, Russia is threatening us because it's a part of psychological warfare. And if we have seen already in this morning, if we are discussing the questions how to spend money on housing, for example, or spending money on defense, it's very crucial that we are going to spend enough for our freedom, and it's spending for our liberty, and it's spending for the European sovereignty. And it's already been risen the question, what are the other parts, the friends and the allies of Latvia doing? And I can give you the information that Germany is on a fast track. We have changed the debt brake in Germany. It was part of our constitution, and we are spending more money than ever in our history on defense. In this year, it will be up to 108 billion euros. 108 billion euros. And I think it's a change of history that I'm in the region as a German politician, give the information, and the audience perhaps is applauding. Let's hope so. Because it's showing we are taking our part of our responsibility. And it's not about only about talking about meeting the requirements and spendings, we are going to show presence with the 45th Brigade Lithuania. We are showing that we are taking part of our responsibility. We want to make it clear. Words alone or goodwill alone will never deter an aggressor. It's only military strength. And the military strength comes from spendings, from showing the presence, from being ready. Defense readiness is the new word. It's implemented in the German debate. We call it Kriegstüchtigkeit, Verteidigungsbereitschaft. We are debating in a situation we are seeing that the full-scale invasion of Ukraine means that hundreds of thousands of civilians are killed by an aggressor in 2025. It's a war raging in Europe, and so we have to bring Russia away from this way. I've talked about our brigade, and we should not only talk about the money and the questions of the budget. It's very important. I think the third question is, are we ready, or do we going to fight for our freedom? Are we citizens? Russia is recruiting its soldiers from prison camps. They're recruiting its soldiers from prison camps. In our Western democracies, you can join as a free citizen the army. And if I see the new soldiers in Germany, up to 15% of young men and young women are joining the army, besides any questions of if we have changed already the new law. We are discussing in Germany a new model for our military service to bring new amounts of personnel into our German armed forces. And we are on the fast track too. It's nothing less than bringing the amount, if we can compare it today, 183,000 soldiers. Within the next 5 to 10 years, more than 260,000 active soldiers as personnel, plus 200,000 in presence, to make clear that Germany is taking our part of responsibility. And I think last and the fourth point, because we want to debate it, we should talk about procurement and changing laws. Europe is a big opportunity. Europe is the answer. But if there are laws avoiding that we can get to a success, we have to change the laws. Spending more money than ever means implementing the Rearm Europe process, giving money to every European country with the safe vehicle, for example. And now it's up to the European and the German industry that they are going to set up new capacities. Because we are bringing, you have said it already, we are bringing the money on the table, and now we are waiting for the products.
Are you confident about their ability to do that?
If we make it clear that there will be long-term contracts and the German and the European industry can rely on our spendings in the next year's budget, and we are going to make this clear, we can rely on that, and I'm still very confident because we are seeing innovation cycles. Last point, if I am going to sign a treaty on new drones or UAVs, for example, I need other kinds of products in the next 2 or 3 years, for example, because it's about setting up a complete new industry. And we've heard this. We have parts and we are taking knowledge from Ukraine, from our partners in Baltic Sea area. And it means showing presence, spending more money, making clear we are fighting for our freedom, and we will not accept any aggression by Russia, and we should name it as it is. Thank you.
So we've heard an expression of confidence from Latvia. We've heard an expression of confidence from Germany. Is France just as confident?
Always confident.
Or even a little bit more, maybe?
Yes. No. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. And I would like to share with you some reflections from France's perspective on how we can effectively strengthen Europe's capabilities, and in order, of course, to uphold or to reinforce the transatlantic link. Sorry. So we all agree on the threat, on the Russian threat, and we think that Europeans must take their defense in their own hands, because we cannot and we should not expect the US to ensure our security, as it has been the case since World War II. And why? Because the peace dividend period is over. Because the US pivot to Pacific is accelerating. And because the USA urged European countries to take more responsibility in their own defense. So it clearly means that we have to reduce our dependency to the United States. This dependency can create resentment on both sides of the Atlantic. And this dependency can make us less safe in a tense, complex, and very changing environment. So, reduce our dependency does not mean that we will get rid of our best ally, United States. Reduce our dependency means to be more responsible, to create the condition for Europe to ensure its own defense within the alliance, and to be more autonomous, to be more resilient, and of course, to produce our own capacities in Europe. And it is for that very reason that strengthening both the EU, the European pillar within NATO, and EU is our collective best interest. This interdependence is a very powerful strategic leverage. As mentioned yesterday by Commissioner Kubilius, the EU is now a real player regarding capability development in Europe. It has made a spectacular leap forward in terms of defense since February 2022. Defense is now fully part of the EU's landscape, projects, and financial tools. At the same time, the coalition of the willing that France and UK has promoted shows our ability to propose to our US partner something credible to ensure future security guarantee to Ukraine after a ceasefire, a peace agreement, or something else. We don't know. At the same time, member states, European countries, are now called upon to make an effort to work on priority capabilities area and fill our collective gaps in order to be fully operational by 2030. This is consistent with the capability targets assigned to the allies within NATO. NATO and EU are converging towards an harmonized objective. NATO and EU are now complementary. The great strength of EU is the creation of financial tools such as SAFE and EDIP. Moreover, the EU goes further than assigned targets. Member states are encouraged to propose joint projects through European Defence Agency. It shows that Europe is equipping itself with the means to deliver. It shows also that Europe is not just reacting to emergencies, it is building long-term defense capacities through an industrial base that we must consolidate. ELSA, for instance, is a capacity-building policy initiative. It aims to bring together military requirements for deep precision strike and industrial projects. Today, 25 countries work on 13 clusters. ELSA initiative strengthens the European pillar in NATO. This example shows that we can reduce our dependency to the US with our own capacities. When it comes to reinforce the transatlantic link, the bottom line is that coordination is key to the success of the US and Europe grand strategy. Europeans must recognize that the US needs to adjust its force posture and will no longer be as present in Europe as before. And the US needs to accept that the burden shifting will take time and that we, Europeans, must rearm on our own agenda. The US recognize that they need a strong Europe. They are not able, with their own capacities and their own industrial base, to sustain or to support European military needs. if we coordinate, there is a very clear path to success for all of us. To conclude, European countries must reinforce their own defense. We all know that. By this way, we will build a credible European pillar within NATO. By this way, we will allow the US to concentrate their effort on their priorities, especially in the Pacific. And by this way, we will maintain a fair and balanced transatlantic relation. Thank you.
Merci, mon général. And thank you also for highlighting the role that the EU has to play in strengthening the industries. If I pose the same question to you, are you confident about France's ability to meet the NATO capability targets? Are you?
Me?
Yeah?
Yes, I think that we are on the good path. Of course, we face many difficulties, and the main difficulties today is to have a great connection, a better connection between EU and NATO. But we know when we read the white paper released by EU 2 years ago, with the 9 main capacity project, we think that it matches quite well with the NDPP targets. So we are quite aligned. Now we have to fine-tune the way and to build the way to connect those 2 documents and to implement to reach the NDPP targets, of course. But I think we're moving forward, and it will be the main challenge that we have to face in the coming month and the coming years. And I totally agree with my German colleagues have said. We have to be better, not only coordinated, but integrated, and to have better cooperation in our industrial base.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we'll turn it over to the UK. Jack.
I hate to paint a slightly less rosy picture, but I think it's necessary to put some perspective here. So in 2015, British policy was to have a sovereign deployable division for its land forces. And unfortunately, at the time, we were still facing defense cuts. It was unattractive to, after the invasion of Ukraine in 2014, to cut tank numbers or artillery numbers or something that's a visible weapon system. So the cuts fell on our enablers, essentially, logistics, this kind of thing. The result being that the military did an assessment as to how many soldiers you need in the force in order to have a sovereign deployable division. And the answer was 82,000 troops, right? So that you could have another division at home to be able to train and regenerate the force in a war and have training functions, headquarters, etc. By 2021, the enablers in the British military were basically enough to sustain about 1.5 brigades in the field. So we couldn't actually deploy a division, and the army had been further cut to 72,000 personnel, below the minimum requirement to be able to deploy a division, all right? Now, what was the commitment that we made to NATO? There is a new threat from Russia. So actually, we're going to provide a sovereign corps. Well, what's a corps? A corps is 3 divisions, okay? British Army is still 72,000 people. The main thing that's happened in the intervening period is we have given most of our frontline equipment, all of our artillery, for example. We've bought 14 howitzers back, but all of our howitzers that we had to Ukraine. Okay, so the capability has gone down, not up. All right? Now, the UK, the British military, was actually one of the more high readiness militaries in Europe at the time. And so when we actually look at the numbers, I think the investment that is happening is very positive. The arrows are all moving in the right direction. However, we are starting from a much lower base than we have publicly acknowledged. And the result is that I don't think we are actually on track to hit a lot of the capability targets for NATO on the timeline that has been outlined. If you look at how much equipment needs to be produced, how long it will take to be delivered, it will be too slow, okay? That does not mean that the forces we have, even if they're slightly below those targets, are not credible, are not well trained, and it doesn't mean that the investment is not being well spent. But I think we have to acknowledge that this is not assured, right? We have to be really, really ruthless in making sure that we prioritize what we have to have for a fight tonight to deter and what we would like to have for a fight tomorrow to deter over the longer term. I'll give you an example of an area where we need to be ruthless. Prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, 80% of the deliverable firepower within NATO was delivered by the air component, by our air forces. And the Russians know this, and so they have massively invested in air defense. And their air defense is not unbeatable, but it is a tall order to break through it. At the same time, we have given most of our stockpiles and most of our artillery to Ukraine. And so our reliance on our air forces for firepower has increased, not decreased in the intervening period. Now, if you look at stockpiles for munitions in NATO that are suitable, not for dropping bombs on targets that you are above, flying at medium altitude, can't do that against air defenses, but are suitable for knocking down air defenses, the Italians have one squadron with some capability, but it's an old system. And in Europe, that's about it, okay? And so, firstly, we need to purchase munitions that are suitable for this task, because it is fundamental to us being able to bring our advantages to bear. But this also requires our transatlantic relationship to work, and we need a frank conversation with our American colleagues, because we can produce all the munitions in the world, and if we can't get them integrated in time onto the F-35, which we're all purchasing, and which is dedicated to that mission of breaking down air defenses, then those munitions will not be usable, right? And so noting how many countries are buying and using F-35, I think we need a much more robust conversation with the US and with Lockheed Martin about the timelines for integration of munitions. And so am I optimistic? Yes. I think, firstly, the capability targets are not the minimum viable product for being able to deter. And I do think we're moving in the right direction. But we should not underplay the urgency. And it's very important that we're not complacent in our optimism.
Okay, well, let's see about the audience. What does this conjure up? We've had 3 expressions of confidence. We've had one of also confidence, but maybe slightly more critical, as a researcher is prone to do and should do, to see what the realism is behind statements. I'm going to turn it over to the lady on the left side.
Thanks a lot. Hanna Shelest, Ukrainian Prism. I have the question to the ministers. You've been talking about your national commitments to improve, but when we are speaking about the collective, let's be honest, we have Hungary and we have Slovakia that are openly saying that Russia is not a threat and de facto undermining these collective efforts. Do you think that you would be as strong as your weakest part? And in this case means Hungary, who is openly allying now with the Russian Federation in terms of assessment the threats that are going around. And I'm afraid that in terms of China, they would continue the same policies. So it would not be the positive, but even more negative.
Minister?
Yes, thank you for the question. And of course, what we see some diversity within transatlantic community, 32 nations, in European Union, 27 nations, 23 of them are NATO countries. So that's, of course, even within EU, there are some formal differences of belonging and also which can also influence some of the policies. But I would still say that, look, yes, there are differences in details, in emphasis, sometimes in quite a serious one. And some of the statements, some of the visits certainly can be criticized. And I would criticize also as a minister, as a Latvian Minister of Defense. But at the same time, once we come to fundamental issues, and one of the fundamental issues is exactly, for instance, Hague 5%. So yes, it was not an easy job. It was quite encouraging and motivating by our transatlantic partners, but at the very end, in 2025, everyone has already 2% for defense. and everyone agrees on moving to 5%. In strategic concept of NATO, it's clearly said Russia is a threat, China is a challenge. Of course, when we come to some of the specifics, some specific policies, tactics, we see some diversity. I would agree with it. But we are democracies where societies also play a role. We see some elections in recent days as well. So, of course, we have to also accept and respect it. But, once more, of course, strategic issues, fundamental issues, I would say everyone realizes on this side of the Atlantic, on the other side of the Atlantic, that NATO is beneficial and collective defense alliance, where one for all for one, beneficial to all of us.
Absolutely. Mr. Hartmann?
I would like to add some points of view to that. First of all, Ukraine is fighting the hardest fight in these decades, for not only for their freedom and their territorial integrity, but also it's the crucial question of a rule-based order. And it's a question of we are going to accept that military threat and military aggression could be part of a political concept in the next century in Europe. And we should make clear that everything Russia is doing is unacceptable. And I think this is takeaway which every European country should share. As also in the eastern or in the western parts, it's unacceptable. Second, Washington DC is looking at Europe. Are we taking our part of our responsibility? Talking about sovereignty does not mean being responsible. We have to do something. And so I can talk about the German initiatives. If our colleagues from Washington DC offered a new mechanism like the Pearl mechanism to offer new ammunition or new material to Ukraine, we said, besides the question that we are doing our part, giving, for example, air defense systems to Ukraine from day to day with the help of your European allies. Thank you, for example, for Norway or the Netherlands. We were working close together. Or for the ammunition initiatives, it's a collective European answer. And besides the fact that not everyone is doing the same, we should make it clear that we, as Germany, are doing what we can with the help of the European allies working with us. We have to put the Ukraine in a position of strength. It's crucial for every European state. And we are going to make this clear in official meetings. We are going to do this by giving the ammunition, spending the money, and also using, and we've seen by several European states, that we are using, for example, the Pearl mechanism, because time is not on our side. We have to hurry up. And the third and last question, setting up a new European defense industry, more innovative, with larger capacities, is an important question to every European country. And it's not only a question of one part of our defending of our security, because if we fail, the consequences are not only unacceptable, it would lead to a phase of insecurity and not being able to any questions of defense readiness or protecting our own security in Europe, which our allies are asking us for.
Yeah, just to add, because of course this is a fundamental question in general, because what is a unity, what is consensus within like-minded community? So this is actually the crux of the whole issue. But still, I would add to the element of optimism and confidence that glass is still more half full rather than half empty. So take into account that, yes, we have those challenges. But look, I mean, in Estonia, when a Russian fighter jets violated airspace, Hungarian fighter jets pushed them out. So they took off and sort of protected also the Baltic airspace and NATO airspace in this case. As for Ukraine, here I would also fully agree and understand what you say about this underlining element that, of course, we should support Ukraine. And Latvia has been one of the front runners, one of the leading nations, and we believe exactly what you said, that what happens in Ukraine, it influences all of us. it influences our credibility, it influences international rules-based order. So that's why the position must be strict and confident. And of course, arming, first of all, Ukrainian armed forces, but also being strict with Russia, imposing those sanctions. And we are still able to impose sanctions and agree with those sanctions. But yes, we need to support militarily and financially. Latvia, we have commitment 0.25% every year. This year and last year, it's more than 0.30%. And we'll be contributing, and we will be committed also to do it next year. And of course, we say, look, I mean, if everyone would commit 0.25%, perhaps Ukraine already has been able to win the war, because it has been 3 times the size of financial and military support for Ukraine. But yes, now again, we are one of the leading nations proposing that Russian assets must be confiscated. And we see that already some algorithms, some formulas are being elaborated, and we are moving closer to this. But it takes some time. I fully agree with urgency, that urgency is always there. There is no time and place for complacency. But again, on fundamental issues, we are able to move forward. Sometimes we would like to be quicker, faster, more strict. But well, we are the community of quite a number of nations.
Speaking of urgency, I think we have, if I'm looking at the organization, we can go a few minutes over time because we started later. Is that okay? A little bit, okay. I have one question here in the front and I have one question right at the back. I see that the microphone is closest there. So we'll start, sir, we'll just start in the back because the microphone is closest and then we'll come to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Lisa Vogt. I'm from BBC News. I have a question about hybrid attacks. We talked yesterday, there was a good discussion about drones, but I'm also talking about attacks on civilian infrastructure. We've seen waves of arson, cyber attacks on transportation networks, undersea cables. So I was wondering, how are your respective countries dealing with this threat? Because it's unconventional. You can't use conventional weapons to deal with it. Do you blame it all on Russia, or there are other foreign or domestic players that you are wary of? Because sometimes, like with the Nord Stream pipelines, we see that the reality is much more complicated. So I would be grateful if you could talk a little bit about that. Thank you so much.
Frans? Yep.
Yes, I have an example, and I totally agree. And we have to be better aware that hybrid warfare needs to have also hybrid course of actions. I just want to take the example of the Shadow Fleet and the intervention that we have performed last week with a Shadow Fleet vessel. It's a good example to respond to this hybrid warfare and hybrid actions committed by Russia. If we succeed in putting some pressure on this Shadow Fleet and jeopardize its economic model, it could be also a good way to show to our adversaries and to show to Russia that we can respond differently, but using some of regular means, some law, some regulations. And that's why today our friend Chad has VTC with Charles of the Coalition of the Willing in order to speak about this issue. How could we put some pressure on the Shadow Fleet with our own means? It's a good response to the hybrid warfare led by Russia. It's an example.
I would like to thank for the question, because this shows us that the new threats are not clear. We cannot separate them in internal or external security questions, because a hybrid warfare depends on the question. It may be in a gray zone, and especially in the open sea, as we see, it's not only our part of our coastal waters. If we are seeing attacks on infrastructures, undersea infrastructures, maritime security is, for example, a question in the Baltic Sea area. We should also address, besides the question of airspace violations, for example. And in Germany, we are debating to pass a law to give more possibilities, or more to implement the capabilities and the capacities of the German Bundeswehr for the counterattacks. But a hybrid warfare relies on the question that an attack should be attributable. Can we attribute it to Russia? Not in every case. So we should put our forces, the Marine, for example, together to make clear that the Baltic Sea area, it's a part of every state in the Baltic Sea area is part of NATO today. It's changed because only Russia is the aggressor. And we've talked and you've given the information on the Shadow Fleet. And it could be also a question of international law because there was a judgment of a Finnish court, and we are rule-based, and we are led by accepting international law. And this should be clear. Fighting with monsters does not mean to become a monster. And there's a thin line between the question of being a responsible state and using gray zones. And we should see this as a new theater of war, of hybrid warfare, we are confronted with in the next decade, for example.
I think it's important to note that the Russians are pursuing this line of effort very aggressively, at scale, and they are looking to increase it, right? And the trend in attacks is increasing. They see this as a way of imposing cost on Europe for our continued support for Ukraine. And so from the Russian point of view, this is retaliation, right? It also has their subversive effects and other things that they are proactively trying to do. But I don't think we're going to deter them from it. What we can do is we can draw a line under certain activities and say, if you put bombs on planes, you know, we will act in a way which makes Russia uncomfortable, right? So I think we can have a conversation to deter certain kinds of behaviors, but we're not going to stop it entirely. What is important is that we work to strengthen the legislation in our countries so that we can be more proactive in disrupting this activity. In Germany, for example, it's extremely difficult to both start investigations into people, but also to move information between different parts of German law enforcement within the federal structure. And that hampers the ability to disrupt even actions which are known about in advance. Okay, so there's legislative changes. And the other thing I would highlight is that the Russians have become adept at exploiting gaps in sharing between our member states in the EU and elsewhere, so that they will often operate from one country against another. And by doing that, they are often able to, again, evade the capacity to disrupt their activities. And so we need to be more collaborative in addressing this as a threat which is against us collectively, whereas most of our legislation is aimed at protecting domestic interests.
Minister?
Just echo some of the thoughts already by my co-panelists. We are not at war formally, but we are not at peace. So what happens in the domain of hybrid, so we see that, of course, there are a lot of escalation from Russian side. Weaponization of illegal migration, disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, arson, sabotage, incidental drones, critical infrastructure incidents, etc., etc. Latvia has been neighboring Russia for a long time. And of course, that's why there is element of silver lining. We are used to it. We already also develop our own immune system. So we are ready to react and act. Comprehensiveness of defense, comprehensiveness of security, where everyone is involved, where everyone is educated, of course, are absolutely important part. So it's not just about defense sector which is reacting. It's about interagency and intersocietal or intersocietal, the resilience and the cooperation. Also, what has been mentioned here, of course, preemptiveness is in collaborative efforts among the nations, regionally as well, to preempt some of those activities. Also exchange the intelligence if necessary, and we are doing it. And last but not least, when you act, you should react also react to some of the actions from the positions of strength. And that's why, again, the Baltic Center is a good example of it. Yes, of course, it is not panacea. It's not that silver bullet for everything, but it means that exactly what you do will have some effect, will have a reaction, and strong reaction. You wanted less NATO presence, you got more NATO presence in the Baltic Sea in this regard. It will not preclude and prevent from everything, but certainly it will add credibility, and it will add also the instrument to act.
Yeah, and that will require a much more active role from the private sector as well.
Absolutely.
When it comes to our energy, our food, telecom, healthcare. When we talk about money on the table for defense, we're talking about our armed forces, we're talking about defense industry, but we're not talking enough about the money on the table that has to come from private companies, because the government can't pay for all of this, who have to do deeper investment in their resilience as well.
Yep.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for. I want to thank all of our panelists for their contributions. No doubt we can't solve everything in this panel, but at least we've talked about it, and that's quite something for a Friday morning as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, moderator, as well.
Thank you.